It is perhaps fitting to launch this podcast with a rant about launching, or more specifically, failing to launch. For all those stories of startup glory and fortunes made, the road to success is littered with many more bodies of failed startups, most of which never really got off the ground. It may even be safe to assume that you, the listener, have your own stories of failing to launch, of startup dreams that never were. If you're a first-time founder, then along with those dreams, you probably already have had a few nightmares about just getting started. Allow us to rant on this for a bit. We can start with the obvious and very much overused analogy of a rocket ship. Gravity is, well, a real son of a bitch, and it takes a lot of energy to get that ship off the ground. Of course, once you get into the stratosphere, it's much easier to forge ahead. Gravity's pull is no longer so strong upon you, and you have the most important thing behind you when it comes to building a company, that being momentum. But how to overcome these powerful business physics and get started? Well, I think it comes down to three main reasons that will cause you to fail to launch. First, let's talk about the forces that are actually holding you back, the various forms of resistance. For the rocket ship, yeah, it's things like gravity or perhaps air resistance, but for you, think about what that might be. What is holding you back and why? Think deeply on this, because if you're able to free yourself and become truly unbridled, you'll be able to move at an entirely new speed. If you're struggling to come up with what is holding you back, then I have a book that might help you see the way. It's called The War of Art, not to be confused with The Art of War, although that's also a very good, albeit cliché business book. However, The War of Art is about breaking through your creative battles instead of winning on the battlefield itself. And the majority of the book is about, you guessed it, resistance. Resistance is what is holding you back. You might call it something else, a lot of people call it perfectionism, but really it's just resistance. It comes in many forms, and it's preventing you from reaching your true potential, or, well, any potential at all. I'm going to refrain from pulling a lot of quotes from the book, as there are simply just so many brilliant ones that will slap you right in the face. Okay, I lied. There's one excerpt that I'll read, as it's relevant to this discussion. Here we go, and it's a doozy. Hitler wanted to be an artist. At 18, he took his inheritance, about 700 kroner, and he moved to Vienna to live and study. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts and later the School of Architecture. Have you ever seen one of his paintings? Neither have I. Resistance beat him. Call it an overstatement, but I'll say it anyway. It was easier for Hitler to start World War II than it was for him to face a blank square canvas. Whew, already making a Hitler reference in our very first episode. Good job, Sean. Now, I know you're listening to this podcast because you're probably too damn lazy to read an actual book. However, this is one case when I must insist, and besides, it's a very easy and quick read. Damn it, just get the audiobook if you can't be bothered. Trust me on this one. Let me also give a big thanks to Hilda, who recommended this book to me at a time when I needed it the most. Next, I think a lot of failures to launch in our startup industry come down to optics, mainly the concern of how others will perceive you. This is especially true for first-time founders. They think things like, what if I fail and I don't get another chance? Or everything needs to be perfect before I can show anyone. Well, let's start with the hard truth. Nobody is watching you. And if they are, they really don't give a shit. That is, unfortunately, the world that we live in these days. What might be a really big moment for you, it's a mere blip for everyone else. This is especially true for something that fails quickly. That's actually great for the goldfish-like memory that everyone has today. I mean, you could probably fail a few times on your way to success, and everyone will likely only remember the success itself. At the same time, don't feel like you need to make your company such a spectacle. I blame social media for turning everyone into an actor and everything else into a stage. But really, you could build and launch your thing without letting anyone know. Or at least not broadcasting it until it's a point where you're ready to share. To me, a founder who is posting daily on LinkedIn about their company building, that's actually a red flag. They're chasing likes and clout when they should really be chasing their first customers. With regard to making everything perfect with your startup before launch, I'm sorry to say that will never be obtained. There's a lot of talk about the messy middle when it comes to company building, but at the genesis of a startup, man, it's an absolute disaster. Even the well-funded startups are a Frankenstein mess of duct tape, shaky facades, and of course, some smoke and mirrors. I hate to do it, but I guess this is the point where I interject with that famous Reid Hoffman quote. If you aren't horribly embarrassed by the first version of your product, you waited too long. Yeah, it's overused in our industry, but it's valid as it is poignant. It's a stabby quote, and so should the first version of your product, with all of its sharp and uneven edges. When I think back to the successful founders that I've worked with, in every case, version 1 of their product looked terrible. It barely even worked in general. That's because they spent all of their time on the core value that they were trying to provide. Yeah, in some cases, also on sales and marketing. You know, this is the one area where us Americans excel because, let's face it, we're shameless and we're also kind of a mess. As I've been working in Europe and more specifically Scandinavia, it's actually maddening to me how much founders will try and perfect something before they've even validated that the market wants it. So here is one rare case where even I will say, hey, you might want to be a little bit more American about that. Lastly, we have the ugly cousin of resistance that is holding you back from launching your dreams, and that is distraction. And boy, oh boy, is there no shortage of distractions these days. These distractions are so bad, I plan to dedicate future rants to them entirely. They include, but they're not limited to, social media, the startup events industry, and yes, even supposed thought leaders doing their thing. As I plan to dive into each of these, I'm going to hold most of my thoughts for now, other than to say the best thing you can do is disconnect from all of these entirely. I know that is tough to do. Their pull is so strong. Their FOMO-inducing trance so hard to resist. But really, you don't need any of them to build your company, nor do you need their validation. You just need to build and put in the work every single day. That's not possible when you spend your time scrolling TikToks, tweeting the tweets, or getting on a plane to attend whatever con, where you'll probably just get drunk with the self-appointed leaders of whatever 3.0. Yeah, I know, it's harsh, but someone needs to tell you, especially you youngs who are more easily seduced by such things. And trust me, even I hate myself a little bit for thought leading on this podcast. But hopefully you'll find these thoughts to be interesting enough to listen further. And with that, I'll wrap up this first rant. I want to thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe for more rants. I plan to release them every single week. Thanks again.